What if the loneliness you've carried your whole life isn't actually loneliness at all? What if it's something way more profound, a frequency of consciousness so rare that only 1% of humanity can tune into its wavelength? What if every moment you felt like an alien in your own world? Every conversation that left you feeling unheard, every insight met with blank stares? What if all of this was evidence of a mind operating in dimensions most people can't even perceive? Carl Jung spent decades mapping the territories of human consciousness. And buried deep in his work lies a secret, a pattern he discovered in the rarest minds, those he called the bridge builders between worlds. These aren't just smart people. Intelligence is as common as rain. These are souls whose consciousness dances in the space between seen and unseen, between the conscious daylight world and the rich, symbolic landscape of the collective unconscious. Tonight, we're diving into that territory together. By the time we emerge, you'll understand why your mind has always felt like a foreign country to others, and why that's not a curse, but maybe the most sacred gift you could ever possess. But the eighth sign. The eighth sign will shatter everything you thought you knew about your own psychological architecture. It's the one that reveals not just who you are, but who you're becoming. This is your initiation into understanding, not into some club or category, but into the deeper truth of your own being. Jung discovered that certain individuals naturally embody what he called the archetype of the wounded healer, those who must first journey through their own psychological underworld before they can guide others through theirs. If you've always felt different, if you've spent your life translating between worlds that others don't even know exist, if you've carried the weight of seeing too much, feeling too deeply, knowing too much, then this exploration is your homecoming. We're about to walk through 8 sacred recognitions, 8 mirrors that reflect the rare architecture of consciousness Jung spent his lifetime studying. Not to label you, but to liberate you. Not to separate you further, but to help you understand that your difference isn't a wound to heal, but a gift to honor. The question isn't whether you belong to this 1%. If you've made it this far, if something in your soul stirred at those opening words, you already know the answer. The real question is, what will you do with this recognition? How will you honor the sacred responsibility of being a bridge between worlds? Let's begin. The pattern weaver. In the beginning, there's the web, while others see individual threads, isolated events, separate people, disconnected moments. You see the tapestry. You've always seen it, haven't you? The invisible connections binding everything together, the subtle patterns repeating across time and space. The way a Monday morning conversation echoes a dream from 3 nights ago, which somehow relates to a book you read last summer. Carl Jung called this introverted intuition, the ability to perceive reality's hidden architecture. But I call you the pattern weaver, because that's what your mind does naturally, effortlessly, constantly. You weave connections others can't see, won't see, or are afraid to see. Here's what makes you incomprehensible to 99% of people while they're listening to the words someone speaks. You're simultaneously reading the emotional undertones, the historical context, the psychological implications, and the future ramifications. You're not just hearing what they say, you're understanding what they mean, why they mean it, what they're not saying, and what it reveals about the invisible landscape of their inner world. Jung discovered that minds like yours can tap into what he called the collective unconscious, that deeper layer of the psyche where universal patterns and archetypal knowledge live. You're not psychic, you're pattern sensitive. You're reading the same eternal stories that have been playing out across human consciousness for millennia. Think about it when you watch a movie. Do you find yourself predicting plot twists not because of obvious clues, but because you can feel the underlying rhythm of the narrative. When someone tells you about their relationship problems, do you immediately sense the deeper patterns at play, the childhood wounds, the unconscious contracts, the archetypal drama unfolding beneath the surface? This is your gift. This is also your burden. Because when you try to share these insights, when you attempt to point out the patterns you see so clearly, others often respond with confusion, dismissal, or that particular kind of uncomfortable silence that says, "You're seeing things that aren't there." But Jung understood something crucial. You're not seeing things that aren't there. You're seeing things that are always there, but that most people have trained themselves not to notice. Pause here and think. What patterns have you been seeing lately that others seem blind to? Drop them in the comments below. Let's see if we can map some of these invisible territories together. And this gift of pattern recognition, it leads us straight into even deeper waters. The Depth Walker. Reality, for you, has always been a layered experience. When someone tells you they're fine, you don't just hear the word. You perceive the emotional undercurrent contradicting their statement, the way their shoulders carry tension, the slight shift in their breathing, the particular quality of silence that follows. You're not analyzing, you're experiencing the multiple dimensions of their reality simultaneously. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what happens when you naturally perceive these layers of meaning Jung was pointing toward, while others remain locked on the surface? This is the realm of the depth walker, one who cannot help but experience life in its full dimensional richness. While others process information linearly and literally, you experience reality as what Jung called a multidimensional tapestry of meaning, symbol, and connection. Here's what's crucial to understand about your experience when you try to share these layered insights with others. They often respond as if you're making things up, seeing connections that don't exist, or overcomplicating simple situations. It's not because they're not intelligent. It's because they literally cannot perceive the layers you're describing to them. Your insights seem to emerge from nowhere, like you're pulling meaning out of thin air. But Jung discovered something remarkable about individuals with this cognitive pattern. You often become bridges between the conscious and unconscious worlds. You can translate the symbolic language of the psyche into concepts others can begin to grasp, even if they can't see the full picture themselves. Do you find yourself naturally understanding metaphors, symbols, and abstract concepts that others struggle with? Do you often communicate through stories, analogies, or examples because direct explanations don't seem to land? Do you sometimes feel like you're translating from a foreign language that others don't even know exists? This is the signature of the depth walker. You don't just live on the surface of life, you inhabit its depths, its shadows, its hidden chambers. And this natural orientation toward depth, it draws you toward territories most people desperately try to avoid. Tell me in the comments, what's one layer of reality you perceive that others consistently miss? Let's validate each other's depth perception, which brings us to one of the most telling signs of your rare consciousness. The Shadow Keeper. There's a darkness you're drawn to that others fear to acknowledge. Not evil, not malice, but what Carl Jung called the shadow, those hidden, rejected aspects of human nature that most people spend their entire lives trying to ignore, deny, or project onto others. But you're genuinely curious about it. You want to understand why people do terrible things, what drives destructive behavior, how the human psyche can contain such profound contradictions. Jung said, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And your mind naturally gravitates toward this process of making the unconscious conscious, of exploring the forbidden territories of the psyche. This is why you might find yourself drawn to complex, morally ambiguous characters in literature and film. True crime stories not for the shock value, but for the psychological insights. Philosophy and psychology that explores the depths of human experience. Conversations about topics others find uncomfortable or taboo, while others are content to label certain behaviors as simply evil or wrong. Your mind seeks to understand the psychological mechanisms beneath the surface. You're not condoning harmful actions, you're trying to comprehend the human condition in its entirety. This fascinates and disturbs people in equal measure. They can't understand how you can look at darkness without being consumed by it, how you can explore the shadow without becoming it. They don't realize that your willingness to face the darkness is actually what keeps you from being controlled by it. Jung discovered that this attraction to the shadow isn't morbid curiosity. It's a sign of psychological maturity and integration. You understand that to truly know yourself and others, you must acknowledge the full spectrum of human potential. Most people are still operating from psychological splitting good versus evil, right versus wrong, light versus dark. Your mind has moved beyond these simplistic categories into a more nuanced understanding of human nature. But here's the challenge. This shadow work often leaves you feeling profoundly isolated. You're comfortable with aspects of existence that others find terrifying. You can hold space for contradictions others can't tolerate. You can see the wounded child behind the tyrant, the frightened soul behind the bully, the desperate need for love behind the cruelest actions. This makes you a natural healer, but it also makes you incomprehensible to those who haven't done their own shadow work. I'm curious, what aspect of the human shadow do you find most fascinating or concerning? Share your thoughts. Below, let's explore these depths, together without judgment. And this comfort with darkness, this ability to hold the full spectrum of human experience. It creates a profound communication challenge. The symbol speaker. You've always felt like you're speaking a different language, haven't you? Carl Jung discovered that individuals with rare cognitive patterns often experience what he called psychological loneliness, the feeling that no one truly understands the language of their inner world. You share what feels like a simple observation, only to be met with blank stares or responses that completely miss your point. Here's what's happening on a deeper level. Your mind naturally communicates in symbols, metaphors, and multi-layered meanings. When you speak, you're not just conveying information, you're transmitting entire conceptual frameworks, emotional textures, and intuitive insights all at once. But most people are only equipped to receive literal, surface-level communication. According to Jung, this communication gap isn't a flaw in your thinking. It's evidence that your consciousness operates at a frequency that transcends ordinary awareness. You're like a radio station broadcasting in HD while most people only have AM receivers. Think about it. How many times have you dumbed down your thoughts just to be understood? How often do you find yourself saying, "never mind," because explaining your actual perspective would require too much background context? How frequently do you resort to metaphors, stories, or analogies? Because a direct explanation simply doesn't work. This is why you might gravitate toward written communication, where you can craft your thoughts more carefully, one-on-one conversations rather than group discussions, or creative expression as a way to convey what words cannot capture. Sometimes silence feels easier than trying to translate your inner world into a language others can understand. But Jung understood something most people don't. This communication challenge isn't a barrier to overcome. It's a doorway to deeper understanding. Your unique language is an invitation for others to expand their own consciousness. You're not failing to communicate. You're communicating at a level that requires others to stretch, to grow, to see beyond their current limitations. You are a symbol speaker, one who naturally communicates in the rich, archetypal language of the unconscious. This is both your gift and your challenge, to find ways to translate the depths while honoring their complexity. What's the most challenging insight you've tried to share that others just couldn't grasp? Let's see if we can find better ways to bridge these communication gaps together. But perhaps even more surprising than your symbolic communication is your relationship with logic itself. The paradox holder. This might seem counterintuitive, but you're often uncomfortable with pure logic. You don't reject logic, you recognize its limitations, while others rely on linear reasoning and cause and effect thinking. Your mind operates through what Jung called intuitive logic, a form of understanding that incorporates emotion, symbolism, paradox, and non-linear connections. When faced with a problem, while others are creating step-by-step logical sequences, your mind is processing multiple variables simultaneously. You're considering not just what makes logical sense, but what feels right, what aligns with deeper patterns, and what honors the complexity of the situation. Jung discovered that this isn't inferior thinking, it's superior integration. You're not abandoning logic, you're embedding it within a more comprehensive framework that includes intuition, emotion, and unconscious wisdom. Most people operate from either logic or emotion, thinking or feeling, rational or intuitive. Your rare mind has learned to dance between these modes, creating a symphony of understanding that sounds like chaos to those who can only hear one instrument at a time. This is why you might trust your gut feelings, even when you can't explain them logically. You see flaws in arguments that are technically sound, but somehow miss the point. You prefer creative problem solving to mechanical application of rules. You feel frustrated by people who dismiss anything that can't be measured or quantified. But here's the profound insight. Jung discovered that this discomfort with pure logic isn't a weakness. It's a sign that your mind has integrated multiple ways of knowing into a more complete understanding of reality. This integration of multiple ways of knowing makes you a paradox holder, someone who can embrace contradiction, hold opposing truths simultaneously, and find wisdom in the spaces between certainties. You understand that life is more complex than any single system of thinking can capture. But this comfort with paradox and ambiguity can be maddening to those who need clear, simple answers. They want you to choose a side, pick a camp, commit to one way of seeing. Your refusal to do so isn't indecision, it's sophistication. You see the truth that exists in the tension between opposites. What paradox do you hold that others find difficult to understand? Share in the comments. Let's celebrate our ability to embrace complexity, and this ability to hold paradoxes, to see beyond simple categories. It gives you a particular kind of X-ray vision. The mask reader. You see through social masks effortlessly. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what happens when you naturally perceive the masks people wear, the personas they present to the world, and the authentic self hiding beneath? You don't just notice when someone's being inauthentic, you can see the specific ways they're protecting themselves, the fears driving their behavior, and the genuine person struggling to emerge from behind their social costume. This ability is both a gift and a burden. While most people accept social interactions at face value, your mind is constantly processing the subtext. You're reading micro-expressions, noticing incongruence between words and body language, sensing the emotional undercurrents that others miss entirely. According to Jung, this perception stems from your natural access to what he called active imagination, the ability to see beyond the literal surface of things into their deeper psychological reality. But here's what's truly remarkable. You don't just see through masks, you understand why people wear them. You recognize the protective function of personas, the vulnerability that lies beneath defensive behaviors, and the universal human need to feel safe and accepted. This is why you might naturally become a confidant to others, even when you don't intend to. People sense that you see them, really see them behind their protective facades. They feel safe revealing their authentic selves to you, because you've already seen through their masks with compassion rather than judgment. But this ability creates its own form of isolation. You're surrounded by people wearing costumes, speaking in code, and pretending to be someone they're not, and you're one of the few who can see the performance. Social situations can feel exhausting because you're constantly aware of the gap between who people are and who they're pretending to be. You prefer authentic, vulnerable conversations to small talk. You sometimes know more about someone's inner state than they know about themselves. You can feel the loneliness behind someone's popularity, the insecurity behind their confidence, the gentleness behind their aggression. What mask do you see people wearing most often that they don't realize they have on? Let's help each other recognize these hidden patterns. And this ability to see behind masks, to perceive the authentic self struggling beneath social personas. It leads to a profound form of isolation that Jung identified as perhaps the deepest challenge of rare consciousness. The existential wanderer. You felt it your entire life, that profound sense of being alone in the universe. Not because you lack social connections, but because you perceive reality in ways that seem impossible to share. Carl Jung discovered that individuals with rare cognitive patterns often experience what he called existential loneliness, a deep, aching isolation that has nothing to do with how many people are around you. You can be in a crowded room and still feel like you're the only person of your species on the planet. You can be surrounded by friends, family, colleagues, and still experience that particular loneliness that comes from operating on a wavelength no one else seems to tune into. Here's what's happening at the psychological level. Your consciousness naturally gravitates toward the big questions. Why are we here? What's the meaning of existence? How do we reconcile the beauty and suffering of life while others are content with surface-level living? Your mind is constantly grappling with the fundamental mysteries of existence. Jung understood that this existential orientation isn't depression or morbidity. It's a sign of psychological depth and spiritual maturity. You're not content with shallow answers because your mind demands authentic understanding. But when you try to share these existential insights and questions with others, they often respond with discomfort, dismissal, or attempts to redirect the conversation to more practical matters. They might say you're overthinking, or being too serious, or that you need to lighten up. This is why you might feel most understood by books, art, or music, rather than people. You search for meaning in experiences others take for granted. You question societal assumptions everyone else accepts without thought. You feel like you're from a different planet when others seem satisfied with superficial explanations. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what happens when who you truly are seems to exist in a dimension others can't perceive? This existential loneliness isn't a flaw in your psychology. It's evidence that your consciousness has expanded beyond the conventional boundaries of awareness. You're experiencing the vastness of existence, while others remain focused on the narrow band of everyday concerns. You are an existential wanderer, one who cannot help but explore the deepest questions of human existence. This exploration is both your calling and your cross to bear. What existential question haunts you most? Share it in the comments. Let's find solace in our shared seeking. But this existential depth, this comfort with life's biggest questions, it's actually preparing you for the most profound sign of rare consciousness. The transformation seeker. Here we arrive at the deepest truth about your rare mind. You're magnetically drawn to transformation, not just personal growth or self-improvement, but what Carl Jung called the alchemical process of fundamental change, the death and rebirth of the self that he termed individuation. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, you embody what Jung called the introverted, intuitive someone, naturally drawn to the depths of personal metamorphosis. You don't just want to improve yourself, you feel called to completely transform who you are. You're drawn to experiences that break you down and rebuild you, that challenge your fundamental assumptions about reality, that force you to confront the deepest aspects of your psyche. Here's what makes this so extraordinary and why it terrifies most people, while others seek stability, predictability, and comfort. Your mind craves the chaos of transformation. You're not afraid of psychological death and rebirth because you understand that this is how authentic growth occurs. Jung discovered that this attraction to transformation is the hallmark of what he called the individuated person, someone who has integrated their conscious and unconscious minds, embraced their shadow and light, and become a complete human being. But here's the profound insight: this transformational process isn't optional for minds like yours. You're not choosing to go through intense periods of change. You're being called to it by something deeper than your conscious will. This is why you might repeatedly find yourself drawn to experiences others would avoid, naturally seeking out challenges that force you to grow, feeling restless when life becomes too comfortable or predictable, and understanding that crisis often precedes breakthrough. You're a transformation seeker, one who understands that becoming who you truly are requires the courage to die to who you used to be. Most people spend their lives avoiding transformation, clinging to familiar patterns, and resisting the call to become who they truly are. Your consciousness operates from the understanding that transformation isn't something that happens to you. It's something you actively participate in as a co-creator of your own becoming. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Your rare mind doesn't just accept this challenge, it embraces it as the fundamental purpose of existence. What transformation are you currently being called towards? Share your journey in the comments. Let's support each other through these sacred passages. The Poetic Manifesto. Conclusion. So there you have it, the 8 sacred recognitions of a mind that 99% of people simply cannot understand. If you see yourself in these patterns, you're not alone in your uniqueness. You are the pattern weaver, the depth walker, the shadow keeper. You are the symbol speaker, the paradox holder, the mask reader. You are the existential wanderer and the transformation seeker. Your different mind isn't a burden, it's a gift to the world. Jung discovered that minds like yours become bridges between worlds, translators of the psyche's symbolic language, catalysts for transformation in others. You're not weird, you're evolved. You're not difficult to understand. You're operating at a frequency that invites others to expand their own consciousness. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Your rare mind is both the vehicle and destination of this journey. Remember, you're not alone in feeling alone. There's an invisible community of rare minds scattered across the world, each contributing to the evolution of human consciousness. Your mind is not a problem to be solved, it's a mystery to be lived, a gift to be shared, and a doorway others don't even know exists. Welcome to the 1%. Your journey is just beginning. This exploration of rare minds is just the beginning of our journey together into the depths of human consciousness. If you found yourself in these patterns, you might be wondering, what now? How do you live authentically with a mind that operates so differently from the majority? How do you find your tribe, your purpose, your place in a world that often doesn't understand your gifts? These are the questions we'll be exploring in our upcoming journey into what Jung called the process of individuation, the hero's journey of becoming who you truly are. We'll dive deep into the practical mysteries of living as a bridge between worlds, of honoring your depth while finding meaningful connection, of using your rare gifts in service of something greater than yourself. Until then, remember, your difference is not your difficulty, it's your destiny. Your rare mind is not an accident, it's an assignment. And you are not alone. You are awakening to a community of consciousness that spans the globe. The work continues, the mystery deepens, and you are just beginning to understand the true magnitude of what you carry within that beautiful, complex, incomprehensible mind of yours. Stay curious, stay brave, stay true to the rare gift of who you are.